chosen one. Before another thought rises, before another memory invades your peace, pause. Take one sacred breath and let the weight of heaven press gently on your shoulders. This moment is not ordinary. What you are stepping into is not just recovery, it is revelation. You didn't stumble onto this message. You were summoned. And the Spirit of God, who sees the end from the beginning, has timed this encounter perfectly. Listen closely. What you thought was silence was strategy. What others called rejection, heaven called repositioning. That moment when you chose stillness over chasing peace, over performance clarity, over chaos, that was the moment God stepped between you and the storm and said enough. You didn't retreat, you rose. It wasn't easy. The world around you may have questioned your quiet. They asked why you didn't fight, why you didn't scream, why you didn't demand an answer. But heaven knows you weren't silent because you were weak. You were silent because you were obedient. You didn't hold your tongue out of fear. You held your tongue out of reverence. Because you recognized something sacred was happening, something not everyone could understand. Your silence was not passive. It was powerful. It was the divine shield that protected your soul from further damage. When she tried to rewrite the narrative, to twist the story to paint herself as the one who walked away, first heaven took note. And heaven knew better. You didn't need to correct her. You didn't need to defend yourself. Because the Lord himself was your defender. You didn't need to shout, your peace was already preaching. Your restraint was a roar. And though your lips stayed closed, the glory rising in your silence shook the atmosphere. What she didn't expect was that your absence would carry more weight than your presence ever did. She thought cutting communication would unravel you. But the truth is, God had already begun to unravel the ties that bound you long before she noticed. This wasn't her plan gone wrong. This was God's plan going right. Your obedience triggered a heaven-backed separation. Visualize it, a hand reaching into a toxic current and pulling you out, not with violence, not with force, but with holy precision. The Lord didn't rip you away. He rescued you. And every inch of distance you gained was divinely measured, not accidental. Your silence wasn't empty space. It was a sanctuary, a sacred echo chamber where God whispered healing into your soul. She thought your stillness meant surrender. But heaven knew it meant transformation. Because you weren't just walking away, you were walking toward destiny. Each step in silence was a statement: I will no longer entertain what God has ended. I will no longer justify what heaven has condemned. You chose silence, not as a shield of pride, but as a sword of obedience. That distinction matters, because heaven does not crown arrogance, but it always rewards surrender. When you didn't chase, when you didn't beg, when you let go without theatrics or tantrums, something in the spirit shifted. It wasn't loud, but it was seismic. That's why she feels it. That's why something inside her can't settle. Because your silence didn't confirm her version of the story, it disrupted it. You stepped out of the scene she scripted for you, and now her lines don't land the same. The stage is empty and she's performing alone. But don't gloat. Don't let your victory turn to vanity. This isn't a moment for pride, it's a moment for praise. Because what you're experiencing isn't petty revenge. It's divine reversal. You're not walking in isolation. You're walking under assignment. The Holy Spirit was the one who told you when to stop responding. It was God who instructed you to protect your heart like it was treasure, because to Him it is. You are not disposable. You are not a placeholder in someone else's drama. You are chosen not by their approval, but by His purpose. She tried to make you feel like silence was weakness. But now the silence is speaking for you. It's speaking truth into rooms you'll never enter. It's echoing clarity into hearts that once questioned your strength. And it's reminding her loudly and clearly that what she lost wasn't someone to control, but someone covered by God. Let this be the reminder your spirit has been waiting for. Your silence was holy. It was not the end of the story. It was the altar where your old self was laid to rest and the new you began to rise. She thought she closed the door, but heaven never needed her permission to open another. So breathe, chosen one. The storm is not in you anymore. It's behind you. What lies ahead is promise, purpose, and peace that cannot be shaken. And now the unveiling begins. She didn't see it coming, that your silence would linger like a fragrance she couldn't escape, that every time she entered a room where your presence once lived, the stillness would speak louder than the words she forced herself not to say. You didn't slam a door. You didn't leave with rage. You simply stepped back without warning, without a storm. And that calm, that sacred calm, became her chaos. She told her circle you were gone, claimed she cut you off, laughed like she'd never been freer. But when the noise faded and no one was watching, the truth began to surface. Not in the ways anyone could see, but in the shadows, where her soul whispered confessions her pride wouldn't let her speak. She stares at your name in old messages, not to reply, not to delete, but to feel. Because those words still hold warmth she swore she never needed. They are mirrors now, and every sentence reflects what she's been trying to bury. Regret doesn't always shout. Sometimes it scrolls at midnight. Sometimes it watches from afar. Sometimes it wears a mask called indifference, while secretly hoping for one more chance. Your silence became a mirror she never wanted. It showed her what she lost, not just a person, but a presence. She thought she had time. She believed you'd orbit her gravity forever. But when you stepped into obedience, when you allowed heaven to separate what was never meant to hold you, the illusion broke. She thought she held control, but she never had authority, only proximity. And now, even that is gone. She performs strength like a rehearsed monologue. She smiles wider, speaks louder, walks taller. But heaven sees the tremble in her hands when your name enters the atmosphere. It's not hatred that rises in her chest. It's the ache of realizing you were more than a chapter, you were a mirror. And mirrors don't just reflect others. They expose the viewer. And now every glimpse of your glow, every sign of your growth is a confrontation she can't silence. She covers her pain with new distractions, new faces, new stories. But the story that haunts her is the one that never got closure. The one where you didn't come running back. The one where your silence didn't turn to pleading, it turned to peace. And that peace, it's become her storm. There's a message she started to write more than once. A confession drafted in the quiet when her guard dropped and her heart remembered. It said things like, "I miss you, and I didn't expect you to stay gone." But it sits unsent. Because pride is a cruel master, and it has convinced her that silence is strength. Yet deep down she knows it was never her silence that held power. It was yours. Your stillness revealed the war inside her. The internal conflict she cloaked in blame, in distraction, in denial. She wanted to forget you, but God didn't let her. Not because He wants her tormented, but because He wants her transformed. And transformation begins in truth. She looks fine. She posts like she's winning. But heaven knows the truth, she's choking on. You were never the weak one. You were never the burden. You were the gift she thought she could return and retrieve at will. But the moment you surrendered her to God, the chain broke. And what she can't articulate is that your absence did more damage than any confrontation ever could. Because in your absence, she lost the version of herself that felt powerful when you stayed. And she wonders now, how did you glow without her? How did you smile without her watching? How did you heal when she thought your wounds were too deep to mend? The answer is simple. You obeyed. You stopped needing her attention to feel whole. You stopped needing her approval to feel valid. You stopped giving her the script to your soul. And because of that, heaven moved. The silence she tried to weaponize turned around and exposed her own reflection. The Holy Spirit saw it all, the moments she whispered your name behind closed doors, the nights she replayed your voice in the quiet, the fear that someone else might now carry what she didn't protect. And though her lips remain sealed, her soul cries out, not for reconciliation, but for the strength she sees in you, strength she once believed belonged to her presence. Let this truth root itself deep in your spirit. She's not mad because you left. She's mad because she never imagined you'd rise. She's mad because she thought she was the sun, and now she's watching you glow without her orbit. But don't return to the orbit God delivered you from. Don't lean back toward the gravity of guilt. Your silence was a divine echo, a sound wave still traveling through every layer of her performance, cracking every false version of the story. Let her whisper in secret. Let her scroll in the dark. Let her wrestle with what she lost. You are not hers to rescue. You are not hers to manage. You are God's, and heaven is not calling you backward. Stay still. Stay rooted. Stay radiant. Because the storm you escaped is still trying to find a way back in. But this time, your silence is a wall no storm can breach. And the truth that broke her illusion is the same truth that is building your next chapter. Chosen one, what you didn't see but heaven did, was that your healing would break more than your own chains. It would break the entire pattern. The moment you chose to stop explaining, stop begging, stop hoping that silence would somehow become a conversation, you didn't just step away from her. You stepped away from the cycle. That cycle, the one that wrapped itself in emotional confusion and spiritual fatigue, wasn't love. It was a loop. A system built on guilt and power, on hot and cold affection, on words that made you question your worth. But when you chose to stand still instead of spinning with it, heaven shattered the machinery that once kept you bound. She didn't expect you to stay quiet. She expected the familiar rhythm, the apology, the checking in, the attempt to fix what only God could ever heal. But when you withheld your reaction, something deeper happened. Her control collapsed. Not because of cruelty, but because control cannot survive in the presence of someone who refuses to be manipulated. Your silence wasn't a closed door. It was a sword. And when you didn't return to the same old script, the spiritual dynamic shifted. You walked away not in bitterness, but in authority. And that authority carried heaven's weight. You didn't just withdraw your words, you withdrew your participation in a pattern hell had hoped you would keep repeating. She spiraled, not because she lost you, but because she lost the version of herself she only knew how to be when you were beneath her influence. You rising. That wasn't part of her plan. You glowing, that wasn't in the script she rehearsed. You having peace without her presence. That was never supposed to happen. But God has always broken patterns before promotion. He did it with Joseph, who was thrown into a pit before he was elevated to a palace. He did it with Israel, leading them through the wilderness before they could step into promise. And now he's doing it with you. Your wilderness wasn't punishment. It was pruning. Your silence wasn't empty. It was strategic consecration. You became dangerous the moment you stopped arguing. You became powerful the moment you stopped proving. Because that's when the enemy lost access to your energy. That's when the chains, emotional, mental, spiritual, started snapping in the spirit. She said you'd fall apart. But instead, you fell into alignment. You stopped running after someone who never planned to stand still. And you started running toward a God who never moved. That was the shift. That was the spark. And now she's left staring at a reflection she no longer recognizes. Her words don't work. Her silence doesn't shake you. Her absence doesn't threaten you. Because she no longer holds what she once did permission to define your worth. She can feel it, that her grip is gone. Not because you hardened your heart, but because God hardened your discernment. You now recognize what you once excused. You now resist what you once entertained. And that spiritual growth is making the atmosphere tremble. This is what breaking a cycle feels like: peace that confuses those who once thrived on your chaos. Joy that doesn't need validation. Boundaries that don't bend when nostalgia knocks. She doesn't understand how you got so free without her apology. She doesn't understand why the silence meant to draw you back became your sanctuary. But here's the truth: healing always confuses those who fed on your brokenness. You are not being cruel. You are being called higher. And when heaven calls you higher, it won't let you carry dead weight from an old pattern. That's why it had to break. That's why your stillness had to stretch into transformation. The version of you who needed her is gone. What remains is someone refined by fire. Someone who doesn't react because their peace has become a prophecy. Someone who doesn't explain because their glow explains enough. Someone who doesn't chase because they are now pursued by promise. Don't be surprised if she checks back in subtle ways. Through silence, through shadows, through mutual friends. But don't let curiosity drag you back into confusion. When God breaks a cycle, it's never so you can return with better boundaries. It's so you can rebuild without the blueprint of dysfunction. This isn't a cold heart, it's a clarified soul. You didn't rise out of revenge. You rose because resurrection was always the plan. And just like Lazarus, when Jesus calls you out, you can't stay wrapped in grave clothes, no matter who helped wrap them. Let her wrestle. Let her wonder. Let her story shift. You are not obligated to explain your glow to someone who once dimmed your light. The cycle is broken, and now the enemy has nothing left to use against you. No accusation, no silence, no ghost of what was. Stay steady, chosen one. The pattern that once held you cannot contain you anymore. Heaven is establishing a new rhythm, one built on clarity, consecration, and calling. And every step you take from here, every breath you release in peace, every moment you choose not to return to confusion, that's victory. Not just for you, but for every generation your healing will touch. This is bigger than heartbreak. This is inheritance. And you, chosen one, are walking into something cycles were designed to keep you from. But they failed. And now you're free. She thought silence would settle the story. That time would smooth the edges of her choices. That if she stayed loud enough in her world, busy enough, praised enough, followed enough, the memory of you would dissolve into background noise. But instead of fading, your absence burned brighter. Not as a fire consuming her, but as a light exposing everything she tried to conceal. She didn't realize that heaven watches what the world ignores. That while she performed detachment, while she laughed louder and claimed freedom, the Spirit of God was revealing what silence can't hide. She rehearsed her version of events to anyone who'd listen, painting you as weak, dramatic, unnecessary. But the performance is cracking now. And heaven is unveiling what was always underneath. She says you never mattered, but she still speaks your name when no one is supposed to hear it. She says you were easy to forget, but your presence still lingers in her atmosphere, etched into the quiet moments she can't outrun. She can't delete the memories, can't block the ache. Because the silence you left wasn't emptiness, it was a revelation, a divine unveiling, a holy exposure. Every scroll through your timeline is a window she thought she boarded shut. But here she is, peeking through the cracks, haunted by the one thing she never expected: your glow. You were supposed to fall apart without her. She said it herself, they'll be back. But you didn't come back. You rose. And now your rising has become her reckoning. Not because you're flaunting it, but because your peace has become undeniable. You're not just healing, you're glowing in a way only heaven can explain. You didn't orchestrate this exposure. God did. The same God who shielded you when words were weapons is now speaking truth through your transformation. You don't have to defend yourself. Heaven already has. You don't have to clear your name. The fruit of your freedom is doing it for you. She hears it now in whispers behind her back. People who once nodded along with her version are beginning to ask questions. Her narrative doesn't hold up anymore. Not because you attacked it, but because you outgrew it. The contradiction is too loud. She says she let you go, but can't stop watching you rise. She says she's over it, but stumbles every time your peace is mentioned. This is the unveiling, the part no one talks about, when the one who controlled the room can no longer control the truth. When the mask starts to melt and the soul underneath begins to shake. She wanted to own the ending, but God rewrote the script, and your silence became the final word. Every message she drafted and never sent, he saw it. Every midnight scroll, every screen she stared at, a little too long every time she mentioned you in passing, as if your name didn't still press against her chest. He recorded it. Nothing hidden stays buried when God decides to reveal. She thought this was just a break in communication, but what she didn't know was that heaven had already made a judgment. And when heaven speaks, nothing concealed stays covered. You are not gloating. You are glowing. And it's the glow that unsettles her. Not because it's arrogant, but because it's real. Because it's rooted in something she doesn't understand, freedom that doesn't need attention to stay bright. Let her pretend. Let her post. Let her rehearse a version of the past that shields her from responsibility. Heaven is not fooled, and neither are you. What you feel now is not vindication, it's clarity. And clarity is a gift. It shows you what words never could, that God didn't just separate you from her, He elevated you above the chaos she used to create. You didn't chase because you were being called. You didn't respond because your voice was being preserved for purpose. You didn't collapse because your strength was never sourced from her, it was anchored in God. And that truth, it is echoing now, through every room she enters, through every unfinished sentence, through every late-night regret she hides behind confidence. She's not angry because you wounded her. She's angry because you wouldn't stay wounded, because you chose healing over holding on, because your obedience didn't just silence the noise, it shattered the illusion. And now, even if she never admits it out loud, her spirit knows she never let go of you. She only lost the version of you that needed her validation. But you lost nothing. You were set free. And now heaven is making sure everyone sees what was really happening behind the scenes. This is the unveiling. The curtain is falling, and the truth is rising with you. Stay in your peace. Let the light keep speaking. The glow you carry is not for performance, it's for proof. Proof that God always redeems the one who walks away in obedience. Let her watch. Let her wonder. Let her sit in the silence she once used to control you. Because what was hidden is now being exposed. And what was broken is now whole. You don't need to say a word. Heaven is speaking for you. You didn't walk away to hurt her. You walked away because heaven whispered, "It's time." And now, with every silent step you took, the old story crumbled behind you. The version of you that needed her approval, that waited for her to see your worth, that sat in the confusion she created, that version is gone. Buried not in bitterness, but in obedience. Chosen one, you didn't just survive. You've been resurrected. The silence she thought would break you became the very space where God rebuilt you. And now your stillness has become your shield, your glow, your evidence, your peace, your testimony. She never expected you to be this steady, this sure, this quiet in strength. She rehearsed your return. She imagined the apology you'd bring. She believed silence would shake you. But instead it settled you, not because you were pretending, but because heaven established you. Your strength is no longer reactive. It is rooted. And rooted strength doesn't flinch at whispers or wander toward confusion. You are planted now in truth, in clarity, in calling. And what once shook you now has no hold. You've been sealed. Not by pride, not by distance, but by the hand of God Himself. She's still watching, still wondering how silence turned into radiance, still circling the memories, hoping one will blink back to life. But memories don't resurrect dead patterns. They only remind her of what she lost when she chose pride over presence. You, on the other hand, are not circling. You are climbing, higher, lighter, clearer, because you learned something sacred in the stillness. Not every door deserves to stay open. Not every conversation deserves your voice. Not every connection is covenant. This isn't cruelty, it's consecration. Let her wrestle with the echoes. Let her sit with the unsent messages. Let her keep explaining a story that's already been rewritten by God. You don't need to return to what the Spirit delivered you from. You don't need to revisit what was only meant to be a lesson. She's not chasing because she doesn't care. She's silent because her pride won't let her confess. But heaven already heard what she couldn't say. I thought they needed me. I never expected to need them. And in that unspoken truth, your confirmation is sealed. You were not the broken one. You were the breaking point the moment the cycle collapsed. The moment the lies lost their power. The moment the script flipped for good. So now what? Now you walk forward. No guilt, no wondering, no waiting for apologies that won't come. You don't need closure from lips. God never gave authority over your peace. What you carry now is greater than explanation. It's a peace that surpasses understanding. It's joy that doesn't make sense to those who thought they fractured you. It's confidence born not from revenge, but from revelation. This was never about getting even. It was about getting free, and now free you are. Let the silence remain holy. Let it echo not bitterness, but boldness. Let it remind you that your value was never rooted in her validation. It was rooted in heaven's voice. The same voice that called Lazarus from the tomb called you from the pattern. You didn't resurrect yourself. God did. That's why it's real. That's why it's lasting. And when the time comes, because it will, when she finds a way to reach out, whether through words or silence, curiosity, or nostalgia, you'll know what to do. Not because you're angry, but because you're anchored. You'll see the difference. You'll feel the shift. And you'll choose peace again. Not because she's unworthy, but because you're no longer available for what costs your clarity. Let her see the fruit. Let her witness the freedom. You owe her nothing but the echo of your healing. Chosen one, your silence was not the end. It was the invitation. The holy signal that said, heaven is doing something new here. And what God begins, He finishes. You're not in the middle of a breakdown, you're standing in the overflow of a breakthrough. So rise, unapologetically. Walk like someone whose silence spoke louder than every shouted insult. Glow like someone who no longer questions if they're enough. Rejoice like someone who doesn't need to be understood to be whole. This is your confirmation. You were not abandoned. You were protected. You were not erased. You were elevated. You were not silenced. You were sanctified. She may never say the words. She may never break the silence. But heaven already did. Heaven already told the truth. Now go. Go forward in strength. Go forward in peace. Go forward in confidence that you are no longer theirs to lose. You are heaven's to keep, and no one, not even her, can rewrite what God has already sealed. The silence was your strategy. The stillness was your sanctuary. And the glow, it's just getting started.